Greetings, my auriculagus caniculi. It's Sababa Black Sheep. Have you any soul? No, sir, no, sir. But I do have a steaming hot take for y'all today. This video will be a bit more serious than my normal content, so trigger warnings for what you see on screen now. But before we jump into it, please consider committing arson on the like and subscribe button. Alrighty, let's dive in. SCP-166 has been a polarizing topic of debate in recent years in the SCP community. You may ask why that is. Well, on January 19, 2013, author Clef posted a wiki article subsequently creating SCP-166, at the time known as the Teenage Succubus. Naturally, a name like that would turn some heads and cock some brows. The very first version of 166 was incredibly flawed and oversexualized, described as appearing to be a human female between the ages of 16 to 18, with long hair that grows at an accelerated rate of approximately 3 inches a month. Seen as pale and light-sensitive, 166 was noted to refuse to wear any clothing, and quote from the original article, thus always seen totally naked. The article states, SCP-166 has an incredible power over males. Upon eye contact, SCP-166 can directly control any male she sees fits to almost any end. The original text informs she must consume male reproductive fluid to stay alive. The article saying, SCP-166 is sustained entirely on human male semen, which she would normally obtain by her powers over the minds of a desirable male. Now, I assume most of you see the blaring issues regarding this depiction of 166. To be frank, this is a fantasy, of which is perverse in nature. She isn't an individual with autonomy or even a personality. The whole point of this 166 is she's a caricature of a deeply flawed, male-oriented fantasy of a girl. The fact she is only a teenager is a blatant example of the projection of sexuality onto young girls within our culture. This idealization of a delusion that sees teen girls as taboo sex symbols than real people, the same as you or me. A lot of the normalization of perceiving young girls in this manner was perpetuated by the likes of Hollywood producers portraying teens like Britney Spears as sex symbols of their time. This created a culture within the early 2000s to 2010s that saw these real people as more toys of entertainment. This was reflected quite notably on the early internet, with forums such as Reddit's r/jailbait, among other communities and content that viewed teen girls being sexually desirable as normal. Naturally, as SCP was formed during this critical time period, it suffered with various authors creating entries that are innately problematic. I'm a teenage girl. I'm 19, and previously a minor teen and now an adult teen. I've had front row seats to my own objectification for years. I'd like to provide a unique perspective on this well-hated SCP. There's been 2 rewrites of SCP-166 since the original. I actually like the first rewrite of 166 the most, of which maintains the Teenage Succubus label but gives more insight to 166 as a character. The second rewrite, being the current one, has let go of the Teenage Succubus narrative. The first rewrite, I believe, provides the beginnings to a perspective rarely explored in depth within this genre of writing, that being the dread that seeps into every pore of your body when you're a teenage girl faced with the men who want to turn your life into a Pornhub plot. The first rewrite of SCP-166 makes deliberate changes to make 166 less of an object and more of a real person faced with the reality of her circumstances. A notable change being she prefers not to wear clothing since it causes her painful pressure ulcers, but will wear clothing if directly asked. Another salient point of change is that being if a male human sees SCP-166, a cognohazard will take place, in which the male will forcefully try to initiate sexual contact with SCP-166. As stated in Rewrite 1 of the article, SCP-166 effects on males causes her no small amount of distress, not least due to her desire to follow a monastic lifestyle based on the principles of chastity, poverty, and obedience. Naturally, I assume this makes most of you uncomfortable to think about. Good. It should. This is one of the infamous reasons why this version of SCP-166 is hated, but this is why I like this version most. because it's relatable in a sense. Exacerbated narratively as it may be, I think it leads way to a commentary on the despair of being a teenage girl within the patriarchy. Displaying SCP-166 as unable to clothe herself without harm, being so desired by men that they threaten her values as a Catholic, feels relatively similar to the experience of feeling exposed no matter how much you wish to protect yourself from others, that no matter what you wear, you'll always be naked in their mind's eye. No matter your values, your personality, what makes you you, it means nothing in the eyes of someone that wants to defile you. Of course, not all men, that's a given, but when you're put in a position where your life is at threat for merely existing without the protection of others, you don't always have the expense to say not all men. I find similarities in SCP-166's affliction on all men as more of an overemphasized parallel. To live in a world that puts youth and innocence on a pedestal becomes a waiting game for each girl sitting patiently for her turn to be violated, to lose her worth by the hands that put her there in the first place. I started getting catcalled by grown men when I was 11 to 13 years old. Grown men would send me pictures of themselves exposed. I was angry. I was furious because it felt like the men around me were taking away my power, taking my sense of self to put me in a box, to this ideal helpless girl to ruin, to merely be another victim. They got off at the thought of me being scared, not knowing what to do, and that enraged me. I'd go to sites like 4chan and Reddit and collect gore, images of men's mutilated reproductive body parts, and I send these images to the men who sent me their pictures, asked for me to show them my body, who flirted with me knowing well I was no more than 13, to discuss them, to make them lose interest. It was the only power I had, because I refused to feel like a victim, to feel like they were above me in any way. I knew that I was weak, easy to take advantage of, and it burned every cell in my body. No matter what, I felt naked, vulnerable, not seen as my choices, individuality, rather just being perceived as a generalization of what they wanted a female to be. I knew it wasn't all men. I knew us humans are so nuanced and not uniform, but subconsciously I grew up not knowing which ones, since there were far too many times I had trusted a man as a minor and they were sick in the head. By the time I was 15, I learned to cope by accepting the reality that this is merely how life is. I distrusted almost every man, yet I wanted to be one so badly. I'm not trans. I guess the best way to put it is I have Freudian penis envy. I wanted the stable power of a man. The best way to explain this would be, imagine a powerful man, then imagine a powerful woman. Media had taught me a powerful man was akin to a man in a fancy suit, in an armchair with a Cuban cigar hanging from his lips. And a powerful woman was red lipstick, tight dress, owning her sexuality to manipulate men, maybe ample with a gun, or knowledgeable of some Hollywood martial arts. The thing is the man in the suit could be any age. He would maintain his power. The woman had to be youthful to be appealing. I would have rather died than be that woman. I wanted to be the man with the scar. I was so enraged being a sexual object that the mere thought of my sexual appeal being my only power makes me feel so disgusting. But I felt forced into it. People yelling at me in the streets, random men touching me, weird DMs describing what they want to do to me, and even friends not listening to my boundaries. Facing that since I was a child. I don't want to be dramatic, but it makes me feel dreadful. It's not as though I ever thought men had it easier. They just have another side of the coin. Many men grow up being told not to display their emotions, that they need to be successful, they need money, they need to be above average. This idealization of intelligence has become such a core value that judgment is so easily thrown around without concern for the repercussions of holding men to this unreasonable standard. Being a man forced to look at what the world sees in you as inadequate is not easy and can be very traumatizing. Dealing with rejection regularly, made fun of when you want emotional intimacy, sex being perceived as a necessity to show your worth and prowess as a man, that's messed up. But the thing is the people perpetuating those standards are other men, and tend to be the same men who hurt women and girls. We have a common enemy. I'll always speak out against them because though our experiences may be different, we both struggle. This isn't a game of comparing traumas. We need compassion on both ends. I'll read you an excerpt of a piece I wrote in my diary when I was 15 years old. To the older men who turn their heads to steal a glimpse of me in my black swimwear, to the simple father or mother holding a baby walking down the sidewalk, all breathing beings with thoughts clogging up their minds. I smile at them all the same because I know I'm one of them, walking down the street to watching another human's body move so profoundly in awe. Years separate us all, minds separate us all. We humans are constantly fighting a war within ourselves. As corny as some of the wording may be, it gives insight into a young person trying to cope with the reality that she cannot change. Begrudgingly accepting that though I might not be seen as anything more than a doll to project a fantasy onto by some people, I desire nothing more than to see everyone as full of a person as possible. To accept what makes them human, to come to peace with what I cannot control. In this, I saw myself in 166, a girl forced into a role that she never asked for, forced to be sexualized by powers unknown, forced to consume and accept that she is innately sexual to the world around her, despite her struggles to reject it. No, the rewrite is not perfect. Though it gives some insight into this struggle, it comes across lacking that much philosophical depth, in my opinion. But I do think exploring upon this topic rather than removing all forms of it in the current second rewrite was a bit of a pity. I think it had the beginnings of a compelling narrative piece about that aspect of being a teenage girl. However, that's merely my perspective, and the original author has every right to take the character wherever they want. Thank you for listening to the end. That's all I have for today, folks. You have work tomorrow, or school, or ranting about how annoying it is to have tits. But as always, don't dream about wheat byproducts. Watch that on fire as if it couldn't die.